Hello, this is Warhammer Workshop, and here is part 2 of my Adeptus Mechanicus Imperial Knight Diorama build. Here are the two kits I will be using to create the Knight. Servo haulers costing a nice £25, and the Imperial Knight Warden costing quite the large sum of £95. Here are the opened boxes showing all the sprues, and this is the start of the build, starting with the servo haulers, or rather the crane section, and as you can see, the servo hauler arms, which I will be using as the knight arm opposite the claw/gauntlet. Here is everything I'm going to be using for the crane. Some pieces are glued together, such as the claw and the engine. I started filling these two using a product called No More Nails. It's like filler, only thinner, and it is itself a glue, unlike putty or green stuff for example. I used it to fill in the gaps between the chain joint and the seams on the engine. This is the assembly complete. As you can see, it will be painted in sub-assembly. My philosophy is to glue as much as possible together without hindering the painting process. Although I could have left more pieces off, it's good to glue as much as possible. Here I am testing the crane on the carapace/top of the Knight to see how it will look, and after thinking of ways to connect the crane base to the Knight, I have gone with chains. Now onto the Knight itself, starting with the leg. Step 1, A through B, or just A, I can't recall. The completed leg here, and both legs completed. The hips/lower torso completed, and glued to the legs, including the pistons. I will add a few notes at this juncture. The Knight is beautiful, one of the best instructed kits I've ever built. They did a wonderful job with this, which I knew, and in part, was the reason I had to buy one, even though the price tag came in at nearly £100. It is also generally well cast, that is to say, it requires little work. Most of the joins and so forth are hidden by the end result. The main problem thus far is the obvious seam lines at the top of the legs, where the two halves join. Other than that, it's 99% perfect. It went together nicely. The feet are complete pieces, that is to say the 4 toes are not separate. Here are the parts I have left over thus far, namely all the armour/carapace pieces, the banner, and the 2 pipes which go behind the pistons across the legs. Because it will be much easier to paint this way, such is the case that I'm going to be painting as many pipes as possible in primary and secondary hues. The main torso/body is complete, and the head, which I was forced to glue in place, because if you look closely, you will see a gap between the head connection, the mechanism which allows it to rotate, which means I had to glue everything in place. This is due to a mould defect, and the head armour piece will cover all of that up anyway, so funnily enough, it's not the biggest problem of this build. Also another problem is the imperfect cast of the 2 main body pieces and the lower torso piece, which slots over the top of the hips we just saw. I struggled a bit to get all of this to fit nicely, but again it worked out good enough. It's nigh on impossible to see any of the gaps and issues, and the back is 99% perfect. The shoulder pauldron braces fitted nicely too. All of the issues and slight gaps were filled or won't be seen. Here is the torso on the legs. It's really starting to become the Knight now. Here are the parts left over, namely the exhausts, which I need to fill and glue on later. The chest plate and the head plate/carapace, which will be all painted separately and glued on at the end. As I said, this Knight is wonderfully designed. It's very easy to paint most of it individually, and I'm going to do just that. And the other pieces left off are the shield and the gun, which goes opposite the shield. As you can see, I created a custom gun using the twin cannon, which normally goes on top of the Knight. I also used part of the melter, or whatever the normal gun is you use for this part, and glued part of that on the end to create the muzzle, and drilled a hole in the end to make it more realistic. It's longer and more interesting and Adeptus-esque to my mind. Though it took a bit of work, I'm happy with it. And here is the claw/gauntlet arm. As you can see, I'm painting it in 3 parts because they are all going to be different colours. If you're going to paint the arm and the hand the same metal, then you can glue them together and just leave off the armour plating. Now, the hardest and one of the most important stages of the build, the gun arm. Here is more or less everything I have to work with. A pile of guns and other pieces left over, a crystal sword, and the 2 arms from the servo haulers. And now we have skipped me going through every possibility and even spending hours working on a crazy laser sword idea. We have ended on this. I have gone for the cannon gun mounted onto the other body of the gun and the other gun shield/protection piece, which goes together perfectly with a bit of cutting. It is glued to the arm with the pistons glued as well, but the cannon is left off and so is the armour piece, which goes over the top. And finally, I have found a home for the two arms. The claw arm perfectly fits at the back where you would normally put a cap, and the laser arm is going to be glued onto the large panel above on the body of the gun, which would normally have some kind of canister. Anyway, moving on. Indeed, we are moving on as we come to the end of the building process. Here is a picture of everything for the knight, and a picture of everything for the knight plus crane. Here I have finally glued on the exhaust after I filled them in, and this is the assembly complete and ready for painting. A final picture here of the knight built to the best of my ability for an idea of the overall look. As you can see, I have left off the faceplate/mask, having only the bare head. When I opened the box and looked at the heads, I realised that the faceless head was clearly the most Adeptus. Very steampunky with big eyes and pipes. I love it. In fact, I love it so much I'm going to be adding 2 more pipes to the head. I made a few mistakes but corrected most of them. The main problem with the build is the other shin pad not seen on screen. Some of the bolts are damaged, meaning it's not only imperfect but very noticeable close up. And really, for £95 you would want a perfect kit, since at this point we have gone through 3 or 4 serious mould or damage issues. However, I will most likely fix quotation marks this issue by corroding and rusting it so much that it makes no difference. In fact, it may even work in my favour, since I am actually going for a corrosion/rusty look anyway. Damage only adds realism. The next part will be going through the entire painting process of the crane and knight, and the marriage of the two, among other things, and will be on YouTube in a matter of weeks. Well, that is all for this video. Thank you for watching.